Most people are too timid, so what we always say is let your enemy prune your bushes, and they'll tend to take the right amount off. Yeah, exactly.
Многие люди предпочитают предоставить возможность кусту расти так, как он растет, и боятся обрезать, не хотят.
Ah, okay. So to start with, you look at the bush, anything from the knee down is no good.
Вы смотрите на куст, и все то, что растет, по высоте достигает ниже, чем до колена, нужно убирать.
So all these, if we gave them time, they may grow enough to be a large cane, but we already have 5 or 6 good large canes.
Они вырастут большие ветви, но они, на это потребуется, мы уже имеем большие ветви, поэтому убираем всю эту мелочь.
All this little stuff growing sideways is no good.
Все, что растет в стороны, тоже убираем.
If this was to bear fruit, it's going to drop down and get on the ground and rot, so it's no good.
Если на нем будут плоды, на этой горизонтальной ветке, она склонится к земле, ягоды будут гнить. Это тоже нехорошо.
So then you get in here and you got something like this laying on the ground, cut it off.
Лежащие на земле тоже убираем.
Come around on the other side, you got all these coming up out of the ground.
Вот эти всю мелочь.
Just cut them off.
Убираем, которая растет.
Stuff like this, no good. Stuff like that. Now, you can look at it and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 big canes.
Вот сейчас есть 6 больших ветвей у куста.
Now you're going to want to leave some canes for your future large canes.
Вот это ветвь растет на замену старых ветвей.
But what you can do is take a look at that. If it's got branches like this, no good.
Вот эти мелочи тоже убираем.
And this nice and clean going up, so it'll branch out at the top. Because what's going to happen,
Что должно произойти?
over time, these 6, 7, 8 branches, you're going to have to start selectively removing one every year, or maybe 2.
Год нужно старую ветвь убирать, одну старую ветвь.
And what that's going to do is ensure that you always have a good new vigorous cane growing for your next year's crop. Now these bushes should be able to last 40 years, 30, 40, 50 years.
Этот куст может расти еще 30-40 лет.
But they only will as long as you can, every year, once they're established, once they're mature, every year you come in and take out one major cane. The problem with that is, if you take out this cane this year, you know, you're going to have only that much fruit left.
Если вы уберете большую ветвь в этом году, то останутся только вот эти ветви, и на них будет меньше плодов.
So, you know, you wait until you've got all large canes coming up and just accept the fact that you're going to have to reduce the crop load on this bush to keep it alive, to keep it vigorous. More.
It is the last idea. It means you have to give opportunity for the young canes to grow up to replace the old one.
Now you go in here and look, and you've got some dead, more twiggy stuff here. You got this over here. You got this down low, and you can leave this to come up in this. But it's hard to see on the camera here. But you're getting a branch going sideways like that. You want to head it off and take all this other growth that's going even further away from the bush. So now what you've got is, so you've cleaned up the bottom, and that looks pretty good. Now you can go in here and look and see what's not healthy. This stuff here, this, and you know, you can look at this. It's growing out nice. It's growing toward the middle. It'll be a nice cane. Come on around the bush. Now, when they're talking about twiggy, this little stuff here is what he's talking about. Maybe some of these little skinny twigs. And the idea is every blueberry plant is going to put on a crop bigger than it can support. That always, whether it's a little plant or a big plant like this, it's going to put on a much heavier crop than it can support.
I mean, branches has to store on themselves the crop, all berries what are growing on them.
Well, it will support the crop that it puts on, but the berries will stay small. Okay, if you reduce the bush itself, what you wind up with is bigger berries.
Когда уменьшается, как прореживается куст, количество ягод уменьшается, но их размер увеличивается.
If you think of it this way, this bush may put on 5 pounds of fruit.
Вот на этом кусте могло бы вырасти 5 фунтов ягод.
If you don't prune it, it'll be 5 pounds of small fruit.
Если не обрезать его, будет 5 фунтов мелких ягод.
But if you take some of this bush off, you'll still get 5 pounds of fruit. It'll just be much larger fruit.
По-прежнему, если побрезать его правильно, будет по-прежнему 5 фунтов, но ягоды будут крупнее.
Now you can step back and look at the bush. It looks okay. This stuff down here can come off. It's not really doing anything for you. And then just look at the bush again, just for the twiggy stuff. Now, you can, you've got to leave some of the twiggy stuff because you just don't have time to go through, because every bush is covered with twiggy stuff. So then the next thing to do is look at how tall the bush is getting. And then you've got to make a choice. At some point, some of these taller branches have to be cut down, because when the bush gets up here, it can't be harvested. So in this bush, it's one of those choices. You can take this out right here, and then it'll branch out over here maybe. You'll just have to see. But you have to constantly keep it back down the size. Now, a lot of that's done by cutting the lower branches here, and they're going to come up, and then you're reducing the size here as it comes up from the bottom.
And from this it will produce new shoots.
Yeah.
Она, значит, если обрезать на этой высоте эту мощную ветку, то из оставшейся части ветви вырастут мощные однолетние приросты, которые сформируют новый.
And then here's more of the twiggy stuff that you can remove.
Эти мелкие ветки тоже рекомендуют убрать.
If those branches put berries on, they can't support a large berry at all. So you know you're going to get small fruit. When this out here sets some buds, you have the opportunity to get large fruit. And that's about all this bush needs, I think, for the time. We can move on to a different variety. I think the biggest thing though to remember is cleaning up the bottom, removing the low stuff. One other factor is, aside from possibly touching the ground, pickers tend to stay up here when they harvest. They don't want to bend over. So if you can keep the fruit from here up, more of it will get picked when they go through the field.
And with all fruits will be concentrated in this area, it's easier to pick.
Exactly.
То есть, когда ягоды находятся вот в этой части куста, человек, собирающий их, не должен сгибаться, ему легче работать, легче собрать ягоды.
Want to move on to another plant?
Yeah, давайте перейдем на другую.
Комбайн может пойти здесь?
Is it possible to apply machinery here?
Oh yeah. Oh, no problem. That for a machine, you can machine one this wide. Nope.
Очень широкая.
You're going to lose, okay, everything that wide is going to fall through there. But with the newer machines, the way those scales wrap around, the scales will come out here, and this is where pruning, like this one branch right here, needs to go. Because if you're going to machine this, you could take that branch off there, and this one, and the clamshells, or the scales, fish scales is what we call them, will be able to wrap around that bush pretty tight.
It means to help the bush to be not so wide.
Yes.
И нужно немножко связать ветви внизу, чтобы сделать его не такие врастки, чтобы машина могла работать успешно.
But we can look at these. There's some wider varieties down here. It never hurts. I mean, you're not going to do anything. The only difference is when you cut them back in the wintertime, less chance of spreading disease, and it's easier to see the structure of the bush.
Когда нет листвы, зимний период, хорошо видно, что мешает, меньше шансов распространить болезнь, только лишь. А means Bush won't be damaged now if you...
No, you're not going to damage it. You just have more incidents of disease.
Может, так сказать, возникнуть больше болезней во время обрезки летом, поскольку...
But we can look at this one, and you can go ahead and cut this off. You got two competing sideways here. Get that one off. Then you got the not very vigorous, sick looking. Come over here and take these off. Obviously, this is all unnecessary. Probably take this off here. You got some dead wood in here. Then you've got more that's going sideways. And at this stage, you need as much going straight up as you can. That seems to be tangled up with the other. And then you can look back and see, well, what do I have? You can take this, cut that off, and then you've got, that reveals more horizontal growth that you don't want. Take this off here. This one could come off, but we'll leave, well, actually no, you can see it's not very vigorous and sick, so let's go ahead and cut it. Outside of that, you've cleaned it up at the bottom, thinned it out. The only thing left is to look at the interior and see if it's got, and this one doesn't have a lot of bushy growth, so I don't think I would prune that anymore. It doesn't have a lot of twiggy.
Здесь нет
Yeah.
большого количества мелких ветвей, он достаточно осветлен.
Yeah, and that one, if there's anything wrong with this, it's this one here, but I'd leave it for one more year and then prune it next year.
Вот эту ветку, которая свисает, он рекомендует обрезать в будущем году, пока можно оставить.
I think, are these growing toward the sun? Is it the shade that's got them curved a little bit?
Набросает на это деревья, они склоняются в ту сторону, эти кусты.
They got a little shade. Here we have a 3-year-old bush, and mostly what you're trying to do here is train it so that it's working its way up instead of out.
Все, что нужно сделать, помочь кусту расти вверх, а не в сторону. Это трехлетний куст, ему нужно помочь в этом.
And you're not going to have to prune much off of a bush this small. Usually, if this is a 3-year-old, you're going to want a bush yay high, 1 meter tall before you do much pruning.
Куст должен быть метровой высоты.
About the only thing you can do here is you've got this kind of a sucker growing out to the side. I don't know what a sucker is, kind of.
Sucker is some kind of useless branch.
Yeah, and
Толчковые, то есть сосущие ветви, они бесполезны, маленькие. They will never produce a real cane.
Well, these aren't useless. They would actually put on berries, but they've already started almost straight out. So you can cut these off and get these little ones out of here and try to get your more tighter growth pattern. Especially if you were going to try to machine harvest these bushes in the future, that would have to come off, because once that got to size and it was a big branch coming out, you could never cut it back. You can cut this other small stuff. Now you can take a few of the side shoots. You can see this has got the dead end on it. Cut it back. Maybe the little branches at the bottom here. More little branches at the bottom. Anything that's growing downward.
Все, что растет вниз.
I want to cut that. A little more. Oops. That's about all you can do to that.
Вот что можно сделать.
And typically a plant that small is going to overproduce. You're going to have fruit on the ground if you don't cut the lower branches off. The other thing is, if you don't prune them and they overproduce, it slows down the growth for the following year. And that's a big issue here when your growing season is so short.
Если не срезать эти нижние ветки, ветки будут лежать на земле под воздействием тяжести ягод, и куст, если он, it means it is not developed itself to produce next year and the year after next year. We have to create big foundation for production, a lot of leaves
Right.
for photosynthesis. Otherwise, it will be always small with low yield.
And it'll be small with lower yield. And when you have a lot of small fruit on a small bush like this, it takes all the carbohydrates out of the bush, which that leaves a lag period before the bush can start growing again. So at this time of year, if you're sucking all the carbohydrates out of the bush, you're not going to get much growth, and a whole summer is going to go by.
Для того, чтобы куст хорошо плодоносил, его фотосинтетический аппарат должен быть достаточным. Так как у этого куста мало листвы, если на нем будут еще плоды, то все углеводы будут расходоваться на плодоношение. И он не будет обеспечивать рост куста. И таким образом круг замкнулся. Нужно сначала создать фотосинтетическую, так сказать, основу, листовой аппарат. Для этого нужно, чтобы ветви росли вертикально и были мощными. И тогда будет хватать и на рост, на возобновление новых ветвей, и на плодоношение. А вот эта слабость, она будет затем усугубляться последующим плодоношением.
А для того, чтобы дать ему рост, что надо сделать?
What necessary to do to help him to grow faster? What do you think?
Obviously nitrogen.
Азот?
Typically blueberries only respond to nitrogen. I mean, yes, they need potassium and phosphorus and minor elements, but they don't really respond much to them. You're not going to put too much nitrogen on. Well, yeah, you could by wasting nitrogen, but they typically respond best and most to nitrogen. So in this case, from probably bud break on through the summer, you're going to want to fertilize them, and then at this latitude, you're going to want to stop fertilizing them probably at the end of July.
Он говорит, что им нужен, кустам нужны и фосфор, и калий, и микроэлементы, и азот, но прежде всего азот. И после того, как начинают распускаться почки, нужно обеспечить азотную подкормку. And stop to apply nitrogen what period?
By the end of July.
К концу июля прекратить подкормки азотом.
Because what you don't want.
Хорошо, а получается, что азота можно много раз подкармливать?
Он говорит, да, если будет много, то просто вы часть азота потеряете. It means if nitrogen application will be too big, some of the nitrogen will be just a loss.
Yes.
But it won't damage the
No.
bush development.
No.
Избыток азота отрицательно не скажется на развитии куста, просто он будет утерян, он не будет использоваться.
Many small applications.
Yeah.
Many small applications are much better than maybe two large applications.
Много небольших подкормок лучше, чем одна-две, там, некоторое небольшое количество больших доз азота. То агрономы говорят, но я бы рекомендовал 80 фунтов за сезон на акр. Это значит, на гектар получается 80 фунтов, это 32 килограмма на акр, на 2,5, 64 и 16, 75 килограммов на гектар.
But when you're using mulch,
Действующем веществе.
when you're using mulch, which you're using here, the mulch will either pull the nitrogen into it or tie it up. So you need to double whatever the recommendation is, probably at least 50% more, and maybe even double.
С учетом мульчи, которая будет также часть азота использовать, сам микрофлора будет, значит, нужно удвоить дозу азота или по меньшей мере увеличить в 1,5 раза. То есть не 75, а 150 или 100. Мы перенаправили энергию корневой системы вот на эту, которая растет вертикально, а горизонтальную убрали.
The other thing on fertilizer is ammonium sulfate, readily available. Yeah, sulfate of ammonia. I would tend to use just sulfate of 2100 sulfate of ammonia.
21% of nitrogen.
21%.
Сульфат аммония, 21% азота.
Yeah.
Аммонийно.
Аммониум. Сульфат аммония, да.
Yeah, yeah. Avoid ammonium nitrate.
Avoid nitrate.
Nitrate.
То есть избегать нитратов.
And then urea. Urea is good if you can get urea,
Ирина очень хорошо.
but make sure you don't leave urea on the ground without washing it in good.
Ирину нельзя оставлять на поверхности. It means you need to irrigate it or what?
Yeah, if it's a hot day, urea will volatilize into the atmosphere and lose its potency.
Better to solution.
Right.
To apply solution.
Yeah.
Лучше в виде раствора мочевину
We can.
Мочевину.
Мочевину.
Let's prune this one here since it's right there. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah. This one's got a lot of low stuff that we want to get off of here. Starting here. Let's see. Get all these small ones out of here. Got some, looks like dead branches here. All of this. This one's obviously lost its vigor. Cut this one way back. All these low branches here you can take off. And then you've got some not very vigorous stuff at the bottom. Kind of step back and look, you got some dead limbs up here. Whoops, come over to the other side. All this stuff was going to put fruit on the ground.
Все, что позволяет ягодам лежать на земле,
Get rid of it.
убираются.
He doesn't want to take it off.
A lot of this one, dry one.
Oh, yeah. Take this one off, right?
And what about this?
Down here. Well, you got to come over here, and on the back side you've got some really twiggy stuff. You can just strip it down. Break some of this little stuff off. This one actually has a lot of this whole cane right here is dying, so it's no good. And looks like this one here might also in the process of dying. You can leave it. Ultimately, you could spend lots of time pruning these up. Talking about this one? You can spend a lot, too much time. The object is to get in, cut it back quick, keep moving, because every time you're in here cutting, you're spending money. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Because it was not pruned before.
Right. And what happens is, once you start a pruning program, it gets easier and faster every year.
Как только начинают регулярную обрезку кустов, то с каждым годом это становится делать легче.
And as you prune, you tend to clean that bottom up more and more every year. So eventually you're going to have 12 to 18 inches of just clean 50 centimeters.
По мере обрезки куст снизу примерно на 150 сантиметров теряет все ветки обрастающие, становится более стройным, узким внизу и более рослым и свободным доступу солнца в верхней части. Tomorrow we'll see his bushes.
Okay.
His plantation.
Small bushes or large bushes?
Большие или маленькие? Большие.
Okay.
As tall as here.
Okay. All right. And again, you could spend a lot of time on these, but you just have to draw the line somewhere, move on to the next bush and move on. Just like here, you've got all this real non-vigorous wood, a lot of stuff at the bottom, and you just keep moving.
Свисающих, их нужно тоже убирать.